Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Indian sessions. That is Indian Psychiatric Society South Zone and NIMHANS Digital Initiative for Academics and Nurturing Skills. Today, we have psychiatric care during pandemics, a panel discussion. Now, we move on to the next panelist, Dr. Murlidharan Kesava, who is also Deputy Medical Superintendent at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome you to the panel.
Good afternoon, Chetan, and good afternoon to all the attendees on via Zoom. A very good afternoon to all of you.
Sir, the next topic would be running a hospital during pandemics. So, what are the administrative challenges, sir, of running a hospital during a pandemic?
Nobody knows how to run a hospital during a pandemic because it's not something that we have prior experience with. Like all of us are aware, the last time a pandemic happened was in 1918, and most of the people who saw those, pandemic in those days are probably not alive now. So the administrative challenges are entirely new. Most of the hospitals have a disaster management plan. We are geared to handle epidemics. We are geared to handle natural disasters and the medical emergencies that happen as a result of these natural disasters. So as a part of the disaster management plan, we usually have some beds that are earmarked, which can be used. Like say, for example, there's a flood or there's a train accident. And, there are a lot of victims who need medical care. So the hospital is geared for handling such emergencies. We have some dedicated beds and we have a disaster cupboard that would be opened only if there is a disaster. So that kind of preparation is there in all hospitals, and our hospital is also prepared. But a pandemic was entirely something that is new and unique to all of us. So the issue here is that it's still an ongoing situation. It's challenging us in many ways. It's challenging us because we are expected to maintain social distancing. It's challenging us because we are all expected to maintain hand hygiene and respiratory hygiene. And these are some things that don't come naturally to our people. So as an administrator, some of the challenges that we faced were that, how do you handle overcrowding in your hospital setting? How do you ensure that all the people attending, both the staff as well as the patients, maintain hand hygiene and respiratory hygiene? A lot of information was circulated by email, posters were put up. A lot of emphasis was laid on health education. In addition, the hospital administration had to be up to date with all the circulars and the directives that were issued by both the state government and the central government with regards to running the hospital. Most importantly, the government has ordered that none of the healthcare personnel should be allowed to leave during this period. So when that is a scenario, how do you ration your resources so that all of them are not working at the same time, and you have a group of people working and another group of people who are there to back you up. We've had to cancel vacations for faculty this time as a result of the order. So it's a dynamic administrative process. The orders are changing on a daily basis, and we are geared up to implement the orders as best as possible given this dynamic situation.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned about overcrowding, for example. Most of the overcrowding happens in either emergency or in the OPDs. Emergency, we have another panelist to discuss about. So how in OPD, for example, in our hospital, this overcrowding was prevented in the early stages of the pandemic itself, before this lockdown happened.
Yes. Yeah, so with the lockdown being announced by the Prime Minister, we've had to close down our OPD services because it is not possible for patients to access our services with the entire state and the country under lockdown. So before that, what we had done was that we had issued an advisory probably about 10 days before the lockdown, asking people to desist from visiting the hospital, try and attend the hospital only if you have some emergency or cannot consult locally for your health related condition. So that itself brought down, and we advertised it in most of the local channels and newspapers. The information was circulated to the press. So a lot of patients actually did not come. So if you look at the week prior to the lockdown, our hospital statistics went down from 1,200 patients on Monday to about 450 patients on Saturday, that week preceding the lockdown. So sharing information was important. We also had a security personnel trying to ensure that patients stand as far away from possible as each other. But remember, even if we had only 400 patients visiting, we had 1 or 2 attenders with each of them. So it's almost 450 into 3. We still had about 1,000 people to handle. So the security personnel were helping out. We had some volunteers from the Department of Psychiatric Social Work, some volunteers from the Department of Nursing who gave us some assistance. So we tried to ensure that they stood about 3 feet away from each other. Hand sanitation was provided for all the people entering the OPD. We also ensured that only one patient, one attendant, along with the patient, entered the OPD building, which is not the usual case. So the security was monitoring. A COVID protocol was administered for all the patients and attenders who came to the hospital, and only after screening they were allowed to enter the OPD building. We also reduced the waiting area in the outpatient. We had security guards keeping people's, asking people to sit as far away from possible as each other in the waiting areas. That's where the overcrowding tends to occur. So as a result of all these measures, what happened was that fewer people were entering the OPD at any given point in time, and the doctors were able to attend to them a lot faster than what is usually done. So we were able to stagger the entry into the OPD and ensure that social distancing is maintained, ensure that adequate hand hygiene practices are followed by the people who entered the OPD, and that continued rather till the OPD services were closed. In fact, we had gone a step ahead and contacted the National Disaster Relief Force to see if they can deploy their battalion to NIMHANS to help us with crowd control. But before we could do that, the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, and we closed the OPD services.
We additionally from this, even some of the units also had their own protocols. Even after COVID screening, additionally the units also asked a few more questions there, whether if a person had fever or developed a cough after entering the OPD premises, they were given masks, for example, and they were seen earlier. They were segregated into a different waiting area. They were seen priority, and they were sent back. So these additional measures were also done.
These additional measures were done prior to somebody entering the OPD building. So we had this COVID protocol being administered to everyone, and if somebody scored 4 on the protocol, we were referring them directly to Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Chest Diseases so that they can get evaluation there and then come back to us if required. So that is what was being done. We had designated a separate area for examination of such patients, both in the main OPD building as well as prior to entrance into the OPD, because it's possible that some of them may have had serious psychiatric illnesses or neurological conditions which would require evaluation by the concerned specialist. So we had made the PPE kits and other equipment available in these designated rooms. But even before we could start using it, the OPD services had to be locked.
Now that OPD services are not running, one services which is running is IP care still. So how can we manage these IP admissions during a pandemic like this?
Again, most of the admissions that are happening in the hospital are, I think, currently happening from the emergency services. The utilization of the emergency services have also come down significantly. I think by almost 50% compared to the usual utilization of these services. I'm sure Dr. Senthil will have some more information to share about that. What we have done again is a similar mechanism. So we are applying this COVID protocol, screening all patients who come in, and we are anybody with COVID 4 and above is being sent off to Rajiv Gandhi or Victoria for evaluation before they come back here. It's possible that some patients may be in delirium, or some patients may be come in with a head injury, and if the evaluating doctor feels that person is COVID 4 and could possibly have COVID-19 infection, then we recommend that they can wear the available personal protective equipment before they examine the patient. And of course, the mock drill for donning and doffing and disposal of the personal protective equipment, I think some mock drills have already happened, and most of the doctors are aware. I think it's also being done for nurses now. So most of the healthcare personnel are being trained in it. Again, what I'd like to say is that we are not a designated COVID hospital. We do not have designated COVID wards. So unlike AIIMS Delhi or Victoria Hospital or Bowring Hospital, which have been designated as COVID hospitals, and they don't see any other disorders there. They see only COVID patients. We have not yet reached the stage where we have been designated as a COVID hospital, and we're hoping that we don't reach that stage. But if it does happen, then all the personnel would be trained in the utilization and how to apply personal protective equipment, and hopefully all of us would be better prepared if it does happen. So most of the inpatients who are there right now are the ones who have been admitted prior to the lockdown or are getting admitted from the emergency services. So they require something like ECT or acute care. A lot of them who recovered are unable to go back home because of the lockdown. So the hospital is still taking care of them. The kitchen is functional. The laundry services are functional. If again, the examining doctor, they feel that during the course of the hospital, the patient has developed flu-like symptoms, they can apply the COVID protocol and try and ensure that the patient receives a consultation with the chest diseases hospital. There are separate areas where they can be kept segregated in case COVID testing needs to be done. So we've kind of evacuated some wards, kept them vacant so that the doctors and the staff can shift patients who are awaiting a COVID test results to be held in a separate area, and people who are examining these patients can ensure that they're adequately protected while examining.
These wards, as I'm aware, are single rooms.
Some of them are single rooms, some of them are rooms where the beds can be put widely apart. But like I said, since we are not yet a designated COVID hospital, this may be for one-off patients who may require such an evaluation. So we have earmarked places where these patients can be kept till the test results are obtained by the treating team.
If it comes positive, they would be sent to
COVID. It's shifted immediately to Victoria Bowling Hospital.
If it's negative, then we would continue.
They go back to the ward.
Sir, there's one more question which many people in many groups are asking about. So, how to ensure a medication supply in a hospital? NIMHANS is a huge hospital, and how are we ensuring our medication supplies?
Medication supply
to the inpatients.
The pharmacy is functional. Only the OPD services are closed, but the pharmacy is functional. So the pharmacy has, usually what we do is we buy, as a policy in the hospital, it's not just during disasters, we usually buy medicines for about 6 months or so, because we have to keep in mind the expiry date of the medications. We can't buy it for a longer period than that. So usually we would have medications to last us for 6 months. And that includes the free medications that are dispensed in the free drug counter, as well as the medications that would be available for inpatient use. Since the hospital has stock for handling, say, probably the next 6 months or so, we have sufficient medications to treat inpatients. And that includes other medications like, say, some common anti-diabetic medications, antibiotics. So as far as treatment of inpatient goes, we don't have much of a problem right now. If the lockdown does continue for about 3 or 4 months more, then it's likely that we may face a shortage situation simply because the suppliers are not being able to send the medications to the hospital. So, of course, with essential supplies being transported, I don't foresee a situation where we will have shortage of medications to treat inpatients. But yes, the free drug counter is not working. So some patients who have been dependent on the free drug counter may be facing difficulties in procuring these medications. So what the hospital has suggested via various helplines is to try and procure these medicines locally, purchase it from a nearby pharmacist for the period of this lockdown. The reason why we're recommending it is, as you're aware, we're not really giving very expensive medications from the free drug counter. We're just giving risperidone, lithium, chlorpromazine, diazepam, most of which are not priced exorbitantly. And, it's probably more easy for the patient to buy it from a nearby pharmacist rather than take the trouble of having to cross a whole lot of police checkposts to come to NIMHANS to procure this medication. So it's a lot easier. And given that there's no transportation, the trains are not running, buses are not running, it's probably less expensive for the patient to procure it locally. So that is the thing as far as the free drug counter goes. But for inpatients, there's no problem.
Probably people can also procure from DMHP's these medications. And most of the free medications which we give are also available in DMHP. So our community team is also working on liaising with the DMHP teams and helping the patients to procure medications through DMHPs or district hospitals whenever that is possible. Now that the pandemic is happening, the lockdown has happened. Once the lockdown lifts up, do you anticipate any challenges in running this hospital?
The lockdown will probably be lifted a lot earlier before we can declare ourselves to be pandemic free. So some of the challenges that we have faced prior to closing down the OPD will probably also apply once the lockdown is lifted. We would still be expected to maintain some degree of social distancing. So we would be expected to maintain, the hand sanitation and respiratory hygiene. So the challenge for the hospital administration would be to ensure this in an OPD, which is probably likely to be more crowded than before. because of the backlog of patients who've not been able to visit the hospital in the last 10 days. And I would also anticipate a scenario where patients probably would expect that maybe another lockdown would be announced, or even patients who are not due for a follow-up visit are likely to show up. So if on an average we see about 1,500 patients plus one family member on a given day in a regular OPD, so I would expect about 3,500 to 3,600 people to show up at our doorstep. We would probably have to take the help from, say, CRPF or one of the other armed forces, reserved forces that are there to ensure that crowd management can be done more effectively, and we need to employ more volunteers to run the COVID screening protocol and ensure hand sanitation. One of the things that we're trying to do is to procure the automatic hand sanitizer dispensers. They just have to put their hand and it dispenses 2 ml every time. And so everybody entering the OPD building should have hand sanitization that can be put up even in the waiting halls, so that they can sanitize their hands as many times as required. We would also probably have to have education videos about proper hand hygiene techniques that continue to be displayed while the patients are waiting for the consultation. We would also probably have to take a call on whether everybody needs to provide services in the OPD, or whether the teams need to be, rationed in such a way that one part of the team provides the service this week and another part next week. You can't run the risk of exposing all your staff to possible infections at the same time. So some of these decisions have to be taken. So we'll, again, like I said, most of these policies are determined by what the state government and the central government tell us. So depending on the directives that we receive from both governments, we'll try and come up with a plan that is best suited for our services.
So Dr. Shrikala ma'am has a few questions.
Sure.
She's asking,
good afternoon, ma'am.
How does the hospital manage with lockdown of various industries like supply of materials, medicines, workers coming to work, etc.?
Yeah, that's a very important question, ma'am, and that's something that we actually addressed even before the lockdown happened. So since, as you're aware, some of the support services in the hospital are contract-based services, and they are provided by agencies to which the contract has been awarded. So we had ensured that the security personnel and the cleaning staff who come from outside, the agency tries and provides some amount of transportation for them so that they can come to the hospital to ensure continuity of services. We also got in touch with the police commissioner of Bangalore, and we sent a written request to him asking all personnel displaying their NIMHANS ID card to be allowed to travel to work and back during this period when the lockdown is in place. So following that, the commissioner also issued a directive which says that the government employees, especially hospital staff who carry their ID cards, may be permitted to travel. So a lot of people have been traveling that way. We're also trying to provide NIMHANS buses to pick up and drop staff working in crucial areas like the OT and the emergency services building, where it is absolutely essential for the support staff to be there. We're trying to send the NIMHANS bus to pick up some people. As of now, we've given a sticker that can be displayed. It's more of a printout which people can display, which reads NIMHANS clinical services. So the police commissioner has instructed that all vehicles which display that particular piece of paper, either on the car or on the two-wheelers, can be allowed to travel. So these are some of the steps that we've taken. The laundry services, again, we have some in-house staff and we have a lot of contract staff who are running, but since the bed occupancy is particularly low at this point in time and many of the elective surgeries are closed, we are not really facing too much of a difficulty in running the laundry services. So we're able to do it. The kitchen is running. The demands on the kitchen are a little more than what they are during usual times, because right now everybody is getting food only from the hospital because the canteens and other places are closed. So the kitchen is running. So we've ensured that all these are there. The medications are available. We're facing some difficulties in getting personal protective equipment, but we've started stitching some of the PPEs in our center, which will be packed and sterilized with infrared radiation. We have got a lot of volunteers to stitch triple layered masks and PPEs. More recently, the CRPF has stepped in and offered its services to stitch personal protective equipment and masks, triple layer masks. We've also placed an order with the HLL, which is the official supplier for Central Government Hospitals, about 10 days ago. We are expecting their shipment to reach us very shortly. So the masks and the triple and the personal protective equipment was a bit of a challenge organizing. A lot of philanthropists have also contributed whatever they can, so which has gone into the common pool. So we have, I think, been able to ensure that the resources are there to meet the challenge of running this hospital during the lockdown.
So she's also asking, mention liaisons of specialist hospitals like NIMHANS during the pandemic with general hospitals.
Yes, we have to have, now we've had to step in and handle the neurology and the neurosurgery psychiatry load that these hospitals were handling earlier, and that kind of support has been provided by other hospitals too. Sanjay Gandhi Hospital has taken over all the orthopedic emergencies. Jayadeva Institute of Cardiology has taken over the cardiac emergencies that were seen in other hospitals, so they are being redirected now. In fact, we had created about 100 beds in NIMHANS to receive some of the inpatients from neurology and neurosurgery that were already admitted in Victoria Hospital or Bowring Hospital, to enable them to vacate the beds faster and convert into a COVID hospital a lot faster. I think about 15 or 20 patients have been transferred from there, and most of the others were good enough to go back home. So we do get the numbers are not as much as usual. Like, for example, because of the lockdown, we're not getting too many head injury patients to the casualty services now, but we're able to attend to it because the movement of people are less. Of course, neurology, OPD, the casualty services are still a little crowded. The psychiatry services are probably seeing about 20 to 25 persons per day, which is substantially lesser. And like Dr. Pratima mentioned a little earlier, most of them come in with DT because of non-availability of substances. So we are supporting Victoria and Bowring right now. As of now, we have not been asked to become a COVID hospital, so we are providing support to them in handling their emergencies related to our specialties.
I was on duty this Wednesday. So a lot of people from Bangalore Medical College who were showing there for psychiatry, because now it's a designated COVID hospital, had come for their medication refill to our hospital. They wish to go back to the same psychiatrist once the lockdown is over. But at this point of time, we are supporting other government hospitals and giving
a lot of government hospitals are doing. Yeah, we are supporting like the others.
Is there a basic training for all doctors and nurses and all other classes of workers on hand and respiratory hygiene and COVID-19 management?
Yes. I think even before the state government and central government announced the lockdown or other measures, we had conducted an orientation program by Professor V. Ravi on COVID-19. I think, if I remember right, it was done on March 11th for faculty and doctors, and March 12th for the support staff and the nursing staff. So the orientation regarding this was held much earlier. I think through VKN also there was a class by Professor Ravi regarding COVID-19, so that everybody gets familiar with it. We did a mock drill for donning and doffing of personal protective equipment. That was even before the lockdown was announced. As a part of the mock drill, hand hygiene. Hand hygiene is something that is being taught regularly as a part of our NABH activities. Respiratory hygiene is another thing that became a part of our education program once this COVID-related precautions were initially announced. So, donning and doffing, disposal of PPE, hand sanitation, respiratory hygiene, and awareness about COVID-19 is something that has been an ongoing process for more than a month. It will continue. The lectures are available on weekend, and I think people can log in and refresh themselves. And of course, the information, we have more scientific information coming out now, so that can also add to
the lectures are also available in our YouTube channel, NIMHANS Indians. You can visit the YouTube channel and go through those lectures. Sir, Dr. Prabha Chandra has asked the question. Ma'am says that communication between different stakeholders is key during this period. How are we ensuring that personnel at all levels are getting the necessary communication and are feeling heard as well?
Yeah, I think that is a very important point that the ma'am has raised. So what we have done even before, it's not possible for one or two people to communicate to everybody. Like, for example, you have a hospital administration team of about 5 or 6 people. We can't reach out to 2,000 employees. So one of the things that we did very early sometime in the second week of March, is to form a COVID action group. The COVID action group comprises of the senior people in the administration, director, registrar, medical superintendent, deputy MS, RMO, and the heads of all clinical departments. We have the head of the Department of Nursing and Clinical Nursing Services, the head of the Department of Anesthesia, Radiology. So what we've been able to do is to create a group of people where we can discuss the requirements that are different. Like, for example, the requirements of residents working in the surgical ICU or medical ICU are a lot different from the requirements of a psychiatry resident working in the psychiatry short stay ward. And it's important for the administration to be aware of the different challenges that each of these people face. Now, that is as far as the residents go. We also have, and the doctors, we also have the head of clinical nursing services as a part of the group. We also have the professor of virology, Dr. Ravi, who is part of the group. So what we're trying to do is that as a part of this group meets regularly, once in 3 or 4 days. The meetings are often triggered off by new directives that we receive from the state government to the central government. The needs of each stakeholder department is discussed, and we try and come up with an operating procedure that will apply equally. Like, for example, in the short stay ward or in the emergency services, you have the doctor, you have the cleaning staff, you have the nursing staff, and the security personnel who all contribute towards handling, say, a violent patient. So, what is the the care that each of them should take? So, the policies are made accordingly. We also ensure that since all of the participating members are there in the action committee, they will then transmit the information to their respective staff. So that is how we try to ensure that everybody's needs are attended to, and our policy making takes into account the different requirements that the different cadres of employees have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your attention.
We also thank Linux Laboratories Chennai for their support through educational grant. Our YouTube channel is Nimans Indians. Kindly subscribe to the same to receive updates about the new videos.